Lindsay, in music, if occasionally someone will say, "Oh, they play with too much ego," and that's never a compliment. They'll say, "Oh, I can hear ego in her singing or when he's playing."
Yeah.
And in dance, you relate. So in dance, how does that work? Because obviously you're supposed to be more extroverted, but still it probably correlates in that.
It all depends what kind of dance you're doing.
Yeah.
For me, I'll often say, or one of my teachers would say, you want to be a vessel in some ways. You want to get the ego out of it. So you're kind of allowing energy to move through you. And that the best kind of movement is when you allow it. And same with creating work. Oftentimes artists will talk about how I had nothing to do with that. It just happened, right?
Absolutely.
I just started writing, I just started moving. Because it wasn't about me.
Yeah, Stravinsky and the Rite of Spring, he said he can't take credit for it.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
I'm sure we can all relate to that with different things in our life where you have no idea where it came from.
Right.
Because you're and maybe that has to do with the weight in some ways. You're letting go, you're allowing things to happen.
It's fixating an identity which limits possibility.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Because both of you have Buddhist and Eastern backgrounds in what you do. I'm sorry, you were going to say
Yeah, I was just thinking that when you're talking about some ways where your brain won't necessarily, the rational mind won't understand it, but kinesthetically, that in dance oftentimes we'll talk about how you want to get more to the animal brain or more the limbic rather than like the neocortex, because that will distract you. But if you can get into the animal way of moving, there's a natural, your body will understand how to do it, but the rational mind will confuse you.
Yes.
Well, it's a fixation of identity. I mean, Einstein said the only thing he knew absolutely positively true was something's moving. So the ego, something's moving. So the ego wants to fixate an identity. So when you fixate an identity, you're not allowed to participate in the ever-changing.
You establish blocks in yourself, and you get learned behavior, which is inhibiting. And that's a lot of the teachings that I've done with people who already play or have careers of some kind. You have to go back to point zero before you can put what ought to be there.
But the origins of it are fear, right?
Yes. Yes.
Which is
which
can be extrapolated into the function of the arms through the kidney, kidney meridian. I mean,
a lot of the problems in the world are based on fear, jealousy, and insecurity, and that causes a lot of the problems we have.
The law that I use is increased mobility leads to increased vulnerability and volatility. The irony is all possibility comes out of the degree of vulnerability that you tolerate. And that gives up what you know, which is an identity of self also, which probably you have to lose when you really want to play. You have to give that up. And a lot of people can't do that. It's too scary.
But you can touch people more when you're in the vulnerable state. But maybe you have to have something there to back it up, like at least some training.
And this is, if we're going to talk about the Buddhist or Eastern ideas, this idea of fixation is very much this idea that you don't want to fixate, and that kind of the three poisons of greed, hatred, and ignorance, making you go around and again because you're fixating on the ego. The idea of transcending that is when you find kind of more spiritual liberation, as well as probably artistic liberation.
Yes.
Well, the idea of giving up control terrifies people, but do we have any control anyhow?
Yes,
I know.
That's the thing. It's that illusion idea again.
It's an illusion.
That kind of Maya, as they say in Buddhism, that illusion of reality or control. It's not really real anyways, but it's hard to let go of, even though it's not real.
I lived with a Buddhist monk for about 3 years in Ellis Hollow in Ithaca, and he said his brother sits on a hill all day and meditates in Dharmasala. And I said, what does he meditate about? He said, lust, greed, envy, jealousy, and there's maybe one other. But the other thing I was going to ask is, both of you, all of you, I want to hear your individual comments about stage fright and nervousness, and is that related to ego? And what would, Richard, start with you, because you don't perform, let's say, I'm guessing, but what would your advice be?
Well, it's the inability to be in the moment, and you're either worrying about something that happened in the past or fearful of something in the future. So you're not able to not able to be present,
Right.
which is going to interfere with the ability of things to flow because they're.
Easier said than done, though, if I tell my students that. It's, you know, it doesn't click right away. You still have to do your 1,000 shows before you feel it work on.
I know.
Well, what's the basis that I'm not good enough?
That's the basis, I think, that others will judge. And the thing is, if you fear about judging, how do you improve on that? How do you get...
Yeah, it's all based in hierarchy that something's not good enough, and you know, quantum physics is nothing higher, nothing lower. So,
That's great.
so hierarchy is what creates our our suffering. It restricts the ability to explore. I think even within institutions, hierarchies limit the ability to explore and actually hinder.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to know how to do what you have to do. And you need your mind to be comfortable that it knows how to go about it.
That helped me with stage fright, actually.
Yeah.
Just developing a better technique so that it was more calm. when it showed up.
And you have to be reasonably sure the muscles are going to do it. And that sort of disappears. Nervousness, your excitement moves for you. When you can say, I know exactly how to do this. I know what I'm aiming for, and so forth. And I'm comfortable.
And Lindsay, what about stage fright? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a good point. First, you have to be prepared if you're not prepared. But you can think of it as energy. I remember a teacher saying that instead of it being anxiety, you can think of how excited you are, that the energy is there. Instead of letting the energy overwhelm you, you can focus, harness the energy to maybe play better.
I mean, one big mantra for playing a musical instrument is all motion goes toward the tone. And very few people would subscribe to that because you can see this all the time, every day, hundreds of people playing, but part of them is going toward the tone, but another part is going away.
Yeah, maybe a scattered energy is what the stage fright is. It's this.
There's no efficiency, and the efficiency goes back to those basic laws all the time.
Basic laws,
See, and and they allow everything. That they facilitate. They let what you can feel actually come out. And you won't see so much of the ego stuff is arrogance. Actually, it's a lack of understanding of how things work.
Is that the mystery that makes somebody really good? Is that what you're describing?
Yes, absolutely. Oh,
And you can't quantify it?
No.
You can't, and it's nebulous? and
Things
people,
are either all right or all wrong, actually.
But he's had students that just because he helped them with their technique, that they would go home and play something and their parents would cry.
Yes.
Whereas before it didn't happen.
Happens
was it the
all
instruction or the experience in the view?
No, it's the principles that I am drumming into them all the time.
About
so
resonance.
They make them their own.
Physics.
Wow.
And I have found personally that I can connect to the emotions better if certain motions are just more efficient, as you know about efficiency.
Just through the motion of
See,
it.
because, music moves through time. And if you don't have time, which means rhythm and all that, and a dancer also, they're moving through time. We can look at a painting and you see the whole thing. Now, it may take you a long time to realize the brilliance of all the details and things, but the fact is, music has to go through time and space, and you do not know what a melody is until you hear all of it.
That's true. It's a story.
And so these are the exigencies of art, what each particular art requires in order to be put across.
Okay, I have a world.
So,
sorry.
and what's that?
Go ahead.
No, and you have to keep everything lined up to do that. And you need a certain confidence in your own freedom to do that. Otherwise, all performances are just in a cloud. There is no clarity. And ego really gets in the way at that point. Because if you don't really know what you're doing, I see it all the time there in Fairfield County, because there are people who are artistes sort of things. In other words, they're not the real McCoy, but they talk a good game. They throw their temperament around, and they've never tried to analyze whether what they're doing actually makes sense.
I think it is a lack of creativity, patterning of the brain, of not being able to ascertain your environment yourself and wanting other people, you know, so it's the sovereignty of the senses, which I think that's the beauty of music, is that it keeps that alive and integrates it with the full brain, things like that.
Wait, can I ask that, I was just, I've been studying a little bit of body-mind centering and developmental movement patterns, I don't know, and I'm wondering if you think, some people would say it's because of maybe how we're being born now, or that we're not placed on our stomachs anymore, or placed on our backs, just in how we're developing as babies is changing the kind of patterning of our brains because of each generation.
There's windows of opportunity through development of where things are integrated. And if they're not integrated, you don't get them. Like there's a point at which, you know, use of your vision and your ears, something coming through that making sound and being able to grab it. So I think that we're losing some of the integrated functions. And I think that the creative arts are really important because they keep those open. Especially, like I said, with vibration, it balances the brain, it opens you to potentiality, so we're becoming more and more restricted with our ability to perceive our reality. We want people to interpret it for us, and we're being manipulated and inundated. I mean, can you imagine what a Mozart concert was like back then? People must have peed their pants.
Right, because they wouldn't hear sounds all day. No, there's no music. There's music everywhere, and it drives me crazy.
Gosh,
I go to Lowe's, they're playing the same songs at Lowe's as 10 years ago, or 5.
Because now we have all these, I have a baby, so we have all these baby devices, so babies aren't left on their, and that it changes the way that your brain develops when you don't go through developmental movement patterns.
Well, and also accelerated education. My kids went to Waldorf, and you know, we're accelerating something to get information at the expense of developing the full capacity of our sensory system to interpret our reality. And then you become vulnerable. And
well, living or being alive has gotten much more complex.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to cope with or to find your way. And so I think there are more potential dangers and problems and all that kind of stuff for people. I mean, we can move around so much. We've got mobility. I could go have supper in London tonight. And,
Sounds good.
Yes, you see, and it's...
well, limitation gives value. I remember when you can go and get a video, and oh my God, you could watch a movie at home. Now you can do it 24 hours a day. So the idea of a value and limitation, I think that you're talking about limitation of gravitational force, giving the value of the enrichment of the tone.
But there are forces, there are things that are permanent, they're part of the system. They came from however this was all created. And you're best off if you can stay in touch with those.
Because they don't change much.
Yeah, no, they don't actually, because they are what allow all that we do to happen. I don't know, it's so deep that it's beyond any of us. And to at least be in touch with that, you will find great composers talking about this. Like Tchaikovsky said, for instance, if he said what is called inspiration could seize a musician even for a single day, totally, they would simply break apart. They would not be able to stand it.
Yeah.
So he said, Hindemith, Bach, all of them, they all have that you're in touch with the unknown. And a lot of Oriental philosophies are talking about these kind of things too. And they're unfathomable, but it's possible to connect to them. And you're going to need all these nerves and all this blood circulation and all this stuff. I mean, I definitely should not be alive. And my doctors, I have a pacemaker, and my doctors have told me strongly, my heart doctor, he said, Burton, he said, look, he said, you are needed here on this earth, and that's why you're still here. Strange thing to come from a doctor. And he said, but he said, your passion for transmitting and handing on what you know is what is keeping you alive.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and there, see, so I do realize, and you're telling us the same thing this morning, both of you, that the commitment and the looking, the search, the never giving up, I mean, that all of these things which are going to have to go through blood and guts. And to happen,
Without the ego.
that has to be a core of you that you never let anything touch.
Yeah.
And things might become possible. So it's a very profound thing.
I think it's interesting what you're saying about the inspiration, because people say that about enlightenment, as that if we were to become enlightened, you would freak out that you can't handle that amount of, I don't know if it's, but inspiration, that's the same idea, that amount of like purity or presence is terrifying.
And that intense understanding.
Yeah, the glimpses, we can take glimpses, but
Yes.
the full amount is, we're not ready.
The most we can really hope for is to occasionally reach into that place.
Yeah, a moment.
Yes, and draw something from it. So, something like that.
Well, I want to thank all of you for your time and for being
Oh, yeah.
here. It's been
Very
so
fascinating.
exciting to have these conversations
Oh,
and
it's 10
connect.
after 9.
Yeah, thank you
Thank you.
so much. That was really,
I'd love to hear
it's
your
really a
playing.
good
Do
thing.
you have recordings?
Yeah.
What's that?
Do you have recordings?
I have recorded, well, I've written a lot of music. I haven't done a lot with it. But in fact, the biggest thing I've ever written is a ballet.
really? Oh, I'd love to see that.
I